Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. In this show today, we're going to be talking about the provincial election coming up in BC. It's on October 19th. And so a couple of weeks ago, you might have heard about this. BC United's Kevin Falcon suspended his campaign to join John Rustad and the BC Conservatives. And is this a good idea? Does this merger make sense? Obviously, David Eby is NDP, and he is warning people that this is not a good decision. He has called this merger a stark choice. So what does all this mean? How do we break all this stuff down? Standing by, I've got Wyatt Claypool, a political reporter and a host of National Telegraph. He's standing by and he's going to break it all down for us. Don't go anywhere.
Like my friend Anita Krishna in Canada, she worked for a global news or a big news network. She started to ask just regular questions. She's like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? We're a news organization. Isn't that what we do as a news organization? And she got fired for that, of course.
Crazy.
Yes, I did. Jimmy Dore, he does speak the truth. If you're new to this channel and you don't know me, I did work for corporate media, mainly for global news for 20 years. And I got fired when I started to question the COVID narrative. So yeah, there you go. That's global news for you. But anyway, on to today's topic. If you live in BC, you might have gotten one of these in the mail. This is your get ready to vote piece of paper just to make sure you are registered. There is a little QR code here, which always makes us a little bit twitchy, but you don't really need to use that. You can ignore it. It just is asking you to check your registration status. And if your name and address is correct, you're pretty much good to go. But it's important to make sure that you are registered to vote. Okay, standing by as promised is Wyatt Claypool. Wyatt, welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Anita.
Hey, nice to have you. Now, I know that, you're quite, I was just going to call you a smarty pants. You're quite informed about, politics, particularly in BC, which is lacking quite a bit. I used to work with Keith Baldry for years and years and years and years, and he was the political go-to guy. And I think Baldry's kind of gone a little bit obviously sideways, as you know. I mean, I want him to do good. I want him to be better, but his political opinions I don't agree with. So I've been watching you and some of the things you've had to say, and I'd just love to get your perspective. So tell me, what do you make of this merger between Kevin Falcon and John Rustad? Is it a smart decision?
Well, in a certain sense, it's not technically a merger at all. Really, it's just that United just said, we don't believe in ourselves anymore. We're not going to pursue the election. Really, they probably ran out of money. And that's when Kevin Falcon realized that the only way of saving his reputation in the long run was probably just throwing in the towel and giving an endorsement to the BC Conservatives on the way out. Frankly, if they had fully merged, I actually think that would have been a bad thing. The way that this played out is probably the best possible scenario for the BC Conservatives, because what David Eby and the BC NDP have been wanting to do is, if the two merge, they get to pretend, oh, look, all the corporate lobbyists from the BC Liberals / United have now joined the BC Conservatives and they're no different. Well, the way that this played out was that John Rustad has pretty much just picked whoever he was okay with joining, brought some MLAs over, and then just said, a bunch of the rest of you are not really worth much to us. So, take a long walk in the woods. And you'll notice with many of the MLAs that John Rustad has brought on from BC United, they tend to be the newer MLAs, people who haven't been in government for too long, and in the sense that, not that if you've been in government for a long time, that's bad. He's more so bringing on people who haven't really made a lot of mistakes.
So that's a good idea. He's making smart choices, you think?
Yeah, and I think this whole thing is probably not going to give the BC Conservatives a big boost in the polls. The problem with BC United is, by the time that Kevin Falcon decided to just dissolve them, technically they still exist and they're going to run a few candidates. But most of the party, by the time Kevin Falcon made this decision, were federal Liberal supporters. So the idea that they're automatically going to come over and vote for the BC Conservatives, it doesn't really quite, pass the smell test. But by dropping out United dissolving, and then throwing an endorsement over to the Conservatives, we probably can split the BC United support with the Greens and the NDP about 50-50. 50% might go Conservative, 50% might go Green or NDP. Is just how it works out sometimes. But I think this whole, I'm just going to call it fiasco, involving how United kind of just fell apart, this is giving a sense of momentum to the BC Conservatives, and a lot of voters do end up making the decision on who they're going to vote for based on vibes. It's just how it works. Maybe we wish it didn't work that way, but it does. And the idea that United basically, bowed down and handed its sword to BC Conservatives gives them a sense of, maybe I should vote for them too. Maybe this is the party that will actually bring change. And it 100% is a change election. The BC NDP really don't have a narrative to run on, and that's dangerous. Even if they were popular, and this is basically what happened to Stephen Harper in 2015. He ran a competent government, but he ran a losing campaign. He was basically saying, vote for us because the Liberals might be bad. Like, you needed almost a big idea to run on, and Harper didn't have a big idea. And what's even worse for David Eby is not only does he have really a big idea to run on, he's running on a horrible record. When you actually poll Canadians or BC residents on what they think of the BC government's performance, it's like 78% think they're doing a bad job on drugs. 78% think they're doing bad on crime. I think it's like, 64% think that the economy's terrible. The only areas where the BC NDP and David Eby are above water are on almost irrelevant questions like, which is the BC government good at speaking with the federal government?
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, the NDP are hugely unpopular. And what exactly are they running on? So I had a little look at David Eby's Twitter account, because that is his publicity machine. Like, we're going to go to Twitter to find out what he's talking about. So I look, and in the past 24 hours, this is one of the first things that he's posted. He really is running on very little. He says, we're lowering the cost of IVF, making birth control free, and as always, defending a woman's right to choose, because everyone deserves control over their reproductive choices, including if and when they start a family. So what is this? This is priority number one for him. And the thing that I found interesting about this is he absolutely got roasted in the comments. Everybody's like, too little, too late, Dave. October 19th, you can pack your bags and head for Costa Rica. And on it goes. He goes, somebody else says, when was a woman's right to choose ever an issue? Oh, right. That's a Dem thing you borrowed. And people, this guy here says, seriously, do you even know what the heck you are doing? Or do you just get up every day and cross your fingers and hope for the best?
That one person,
hugely unpopular.
That one person had a really insightful comment about just stealing whatever the Dems are doing in the U.S. because yesterday they actually posted a video of Kamala Harris for some reason after the debate.
That's her big thing too, IVF and fertility. Yeah, go on.
It's so weird, and the thing is that this is indicative of a losing campaign. It's listless. They don't know what they're doing. All they have is conservative bad. And even then, they can't even really argue that the Conservatives' agenda is unpopular. Lowering taxes is not unpopular. Lowering regulations is not unpopular. Trying to reform the healthcare industry, the education systems are not unpopular. So they have to basically just harp on about fringe issues. Fringe issues that the BC Conservatives are not running on. I can tell you that they're not running on a pro-life agenda because I'm a pro-life person and I don't see anything really pro-life in it. And I can understand that it's really not the time to be running on anything that's a side issue, considering the fact that the vast majority of people just want to talk about affordability. And that's the thing I usually drop into the comments of a lot of BC NDP MLAs when they start going down this road, that the BC Conservatives are, like the anti-abortion party or whatever, in an election cycle where that's not been brought up once. There's a lot of other things that they've been trying to bring up, like John Rustad's a climate denier. And what I always comment is that people can't afford groceries and rent. Yeah. And we're going to whine about the fact that John Rustad doesn't share the alarmist view of the climate. He even said he believes in climate change, and that's not enough, because he has to believe we're all underwater in 10 years, or I guess he doesn't care about the province. Nobody's showing. This is not a climate election. This is not an IVF election. I'm sorry to tell them.
Yeah,
This
these are not the issues that are top of mind for people in BC. 1 in 4 Canadians are going to the food bank. You have an extra 23% carbon tax, groceries, inflation, just back to school time, making lunches, feeding the kids. These are things top of mind.
There was a 13-year-old girl just found dead recently in a homeless homeless addict encampment. She was addicted to drugs and opioids at the age of 11, and the government refused her parents' request for involuntary treatment, that it's up to her whether or not she wants to keep doing meth. She's not allowed to drink. She's not allowed to buy cigarettes. She's not allowed to drive. But the government was giving her crack pipes and all these other safe use for like illicit drugs type like paraphernalia. And we're all
which you can get at a vending machine in some locations.
Yeah, not even just any location. In front of ERs, in front of the Nanaimo ER, in front of many other ERs around the province, you can go and buy these things. It's utterly ridiculous. And then when a 13-year-old girl dies because of just the drugs for everybody agenda of the BC NDP, we're all supposed to then think, but maybe John Rustad doesn't want to have free IVF.
Yeah, honestly, that is not top of mind. That is not top of mind right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of John Rustad, let's have a look. He did this big interview with Jordan Peterson, which I watched the whole thing of. And, it's hard to, I think like nowadays our faith is lost in a lot of things. We've had so much sort of abuse and mistrust with the institutions that we thought were there to protect us have let us down quite a bit. So even myself, when I watch things, I always watch things with a degree of skepticism because you don't know really what to believe. But having said all that, I liked what I heard. I liked what I heard when I saw John Rustad speak, and I thought that was a great interview that he did with Peterson.
It was an honest conversation. An honest conversation that somebody like David Eby is not capable of having. David Eby needs to have pre-rehearsed statements. He needs to be surrounded by teleprompters where John Rustad can actually just talk. He can just talk
off the top of his head. Exactly. Let's have a look at a little snippet here. Okay.
Let's delve into the situation in British Columbia. The New Democratic Party in Canada have been in power. How long have they been in power now?
Been in power 7 years.
7 years. Okay. And so in your estimation, what is the consequence of that?
When you look at it, I mean, our quality of life has declined. We've lost almost 2/3 of our forest sector. People aren't investing in mining. Nobody wants to invest in this province. I think it was something like 70,000 people left the province last year. A third of British Columbians were looking at leaving. People can't buy a house. This huge problem with drugs and addiction, with their safe supply and decriminalization approach that they've taken, which has just devastated lives and families and communities. People are waking up and looking and thinking, wait a second, what's really going on here? And I think that attributes a lot to why the Conservative Party in British Columbia has risen so rapidly.
Yeah. What did you think of that statement? I mean, he does make a lot of sense, and that's what people are looking for nowadays.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like you have to hear him deliver a dissertation on the problems with BC. The thing is that what he's saying is reflecting what everybody already notices. There's not very many people who, and this is actually kind of the interesting thing about the election dynamics. Conventional wisdom, and it's conventional wisdom because it generally is true, a party will retain 70% of its support from the last election going into the next election unless you fall apart like United. But David Eby, because he is just nothing like John Horgan. John Horgan, the previous premier of British Columbia and NDP leader, he was what I would describe as like a blue-collar, blue NDPer. A plumber, a small business owner, somebody who works in the forest sector, they could conceivably vote for somebody like John Horgan. He kind of had that feeling of an actual, I guess it's almost a trite thing to say, but he's kind of a man's man. David Eby looks like Gabe from The Office. He comes off like somebody who's never really had a real job in his life, because in a lot of ways he really hasn't had a job in a long time. He's been an
Yeah.
activist and a politician for quite a while now. And so I don't think that a plumber, a carpenter, anyone who works tough construction jobs, they're driving home at night with a few hours left to vote, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to pull the car over and pull the switch for David Eby. It's not happening.
He's extremely unrelatable. And John Horgan, I wasn't a big fan of, but he was a man's man. You could picture having a burger and a beer with him, right?
Yeah.
He looks like, I think he was a football player. He looks like somebody that could maybe, hammer a fence together or something like that.
Like, it's kind of like the same appeal. He was a little bit more working class looking, but kind of like Jack Layton. Jack Layton still looked like a businessman from the federal NDP. He looked like someone who could like run a business meeting.
Yeah.
David Eby looks like someone who's more comfortable at a Columbia University occupation than he is at a business meeting. That's the problem. He's a protester occupying the premier's office because every approach he takes to all the issues is an activist approach. How do we stay ideologically pure? That's why, even though he was initially backing off all his stupid safe supply and decriminalization programs, right a couple weeks ago, he just basically reinstated all of them and said he's not going to walk away from it. Now they're even proposing, and the NDP is going to pretend, no, that's not something we were seriously going to do. Well, they funded the studies, and they've been funding these organizations saying that we should turn all public and private bathrooms that are in businesses into basically safe consumption sites. We should ban blue lights in washrooms because blue lights make it harder for an addict to find the vein.
Good Lord. It just strikes me that he'll just say whatever he's told to say, whatever instruction he's given, whatever platforms he's meant to endorse. That's what he does. I mean, you described that really well as a university kind of a protester, activist type of guy. One thing that I did read is that when the budget that Eby inherited from Horgan 2 years ago. This is unconfirmed, but I read somewhere he inherited a $6 billion surplus, but now the deficit is $1 billion over budget. So what on earth did he do in 2 years with our money, with our tax money? And the other thing I wanted to address is that John Rustad talks a lot about no one's going to want to invest in business here with our taxes. Why would you take your business here, bring your business here? We're ruining, I think, our business economy to an extent. What are we doing with the money? What's going on?
I believe we're the most heavily taxed province in the country at the moment. And it's that if you're at the top marginal tax bracket in BC, as many small business owners are, since that's how they tend to file their income, you're paying well more than 50% of your income in taxes before you're even paying for any of your basic necessities. And considering the fact that the average house price in British Columbia, I believe, is $990,000. That's not just Vancouver and Victoria. That's everywhere. And that, is anyone ever going to move their business here when you could just go over the border to Washington State? You could go over the border to Alberta. Frankly, you could probably go over the border to the Northwest Territories, the Yukon. It would still be better set up a business because, and I've said this to a few people before, the sort of character of British Columbia under the BC NDP to do a 3-second impression is, who told you you're allowed to do that? It's busybody-ish. It's obnoxious. It treats like business owners who have been in their business for decades like they're 5-year-olds, and they need some 20-something regulator to come over and tell them how they should be doing things. I just had somebody who actually was a developer. When they were getting all their permits to build, environmental inspections done, they had the inspector, who's maybe 30 or whatever, come to the work site and looking over everything, and they said, it's all good, but you have to get rid of that pipe over there. And the guy's like, that's a well. And the person's like, oh yes, no, never mind, sorry. And it's like, how do you not know this? You're inspecting houses, and you are about to tell me to maybe incur $100,000 fee because you don't know what a well is, and you're a house inspector.
Oh, and that's crazy. But there are a lot of people unqualified to do their jobs. They just work their way up. I don't know how they get land jobs sometimes, when they're completely unqualified. So what do you think is going to happen on the 19th I don't think, not to, I just don't, this isn't even a tight race. This isn't even neck and neck to me. I don't think Eby is going to be successful. But before you give me your answer on that, a lot of people don't know that David Eby, well, they don't even know who he is. I was out last night with my best girlfriend, and she doesn't follow any of this stuff. And I was telling her I was going to interview you, and she's like, well, what are you going to talk about? Well, who is he? And then I was explaining everything. And these are names. She comes home from work and watches Netflix. But a lot of people don't know that David Eby wasn't even elected, right?
Yeah, not only was he not elected, but the NDP brass bullied people out of the leadership race for the BC NDP to replace Horgan. The activist set in the party, who are very powerful around the Vancouver and Victoria bubbles, they wanted to shove him through, which is kind of a big tell that he couldn't actually win a leadership race, but now you're expecting that he might be able to win a provincial election. And right now the polls show that most of them, it depends on the pollster. Like, every once in a while you have a very clownish pollster come out and they say +8 NDP. Like, it's not, no. But most of the other pollsters are showing it's a tie race. Maybe the NDP's up 1. The Conservatives might be up 1, 2, or 3, depending on the pollster. But turnout is going to be a completely different story. There is a difference in calling people up and asking them who they're going to vote for on the phone when they don't actually have to get up and go to the polling station. But I think that the BC Conservatives, not only are we in most polls a little bit ahead of the BC NDP, but our people are probably going to be 85, 90% likely to turn out, where many of the BC NDP supporters, it's going to be, 65% turnout, 70. Like, what heroic thing are they voting for? They're voting to keep whatever terrible policies are currently in place going, and maybe with extra money added on top. The BC NDP doesn't even have really anything to give away. They've already given away everything. There's no more giveaway sort of like handouts that they can propose to voters to get them to vote for them. That's why they're scraping the bottom of the barrel and saying free contraceptives, maybe.
Yeah.
Technically, the federal government's already doing that too. So I don't even know what they're talking about.
The federal government is already doing that with their pharmacare thing. The thing that they fund is like diabetes medication and free birth control or whatever. Yeah. You know what? I've been alive a long time. I know how to not get pregnant. Like, I don't really need, that much.
Also, a lot of this stuff costs nothing. It costs like $5. I mean,
whereas if you've been injured by a certain something that we can't mention and you're in a wheelchair, we give you no support, right?
Yeah.
No support on that, and there are so many treatments and things and that people need medical attention that perhaps birth control isn't the thing. It's not
the problem. And to maybe jump onto the healthcare issue just briefly in BC, it's actually insane that I'm right now in the riding of Abbotsford South, but in an adjacent riding to us, Abbotsford Mission, who's currently being represented by the very lackluster BC NDP MLA Pam Alexis, and also the agricultural minister who doesn't know anything about agriculture, that in her riding, the Mission Memorial Hospital has the ER has closed like 5 or 6 times in the past 3 or 4 weeks. It's actually just insane that they can't even keep their hospitals open. And the problem with it is that they've incentivized people to not actually be nurses and doctors, to actually get paid a lot as a nurse. In the sense that it's a good salary starting out, but not when you consider all the education you have to go to get to the position. So you're making probably 89,000, 92,000 or so when you first start out. Might be a little bit less than that. And you have to work 12 years before you actually get to your maximum wage or to your maximum salary. But the problem is all the incentives go towards you stop being a nurse and become an HR rep. Because instead of being a nurse for 10 years and having to work like a really difficult job, why not just jump in with the union and get them to get you recommended as a new HR rep? And you now make $150,000 a year for a cushier job that makes you not, like, you don't have to deliver medicine. British Columbia does not have a problem with not enough beds. We have a problem in hospitals of not enough nurses, because BC has 10 times the amount of hospital administrators that Germany does in its system. Our rate of administrators and managers is off the charts. it's insane how many people who are basically just paid to sit around pushing paper about nothing. And this is actually a problem in my home province of Alberta. I believe the statistic or the stat was in the AHS, the Alberta Health Service, there's like over 300 people who work in management positions who don't manage anybody underneath them. So you're some sort of like diversity coordinator, or you're the mental health manager for whatever hospital, and you get paid an exorbitant salary, and you don't actually do anything. Nobody could say what you do. And this is something that Rupa Subramania had pointed out on X one time, and I think about it all the time. And it's talking about federal government jobs, but it definitely applies to a lot of these administrative jobs in healthcare, is that they call it in the federal government club fed because of how easy it is to be in these paper pushing positions. And then you have the ridiculousness that they're now passing these logging off rules where you can't make your employee, if you're a federally regulated worker, managers can't make you do any work after 5 p.m. Like, what are they going to make you play another game of Tetris on your computer? Like, I don't even know what you do that a manager would be holding you back and trying to force you to work on a Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's a huge national problem too, is that we throw money into, like, they're just federal bureaucratic jobs. Like even the school program that it has no food, but that you have to hire all the staff. It's mainly just creating jobs for government, and I'm not sure exactly what these government workers do. And that was a really interesting point you brought up about hospital administrators. I mean, it's much cushier and easier. You want to be working 4 12-hour shifts a day, and nurses work so hard. It's a brutal job. And
most people who work in management in hospitals, not most, but a lot of these people who are working in these cushier HR administrative logistic positions, they actually are nurses. They could be nurses. And the problem is, again, that we end up, the incentives move you towards get out of medicine and get into administration.
Yeah. So these are some of the problems, but what about the solutions? Like John Rustad, if he were to win, if his party were to win, can they eliminate certain things? Like, can they bring the healthcare workers are slowly coming back to work after these ridiculous mandates. That's why there's a shortage. I mean, we all know that. But provincially, can you get rid of the carbon tax and things like that?
So with let's start off with the carbon tax. I'll jump back into healthcare for solutions on healthcare. The carbon tax, obviously, there still is a federal carbon tax.
Right.
We are going to be relying on Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives federally to get rid of that carbon tax. But in the meantime, provincially, if we eliminate the provincial carbon tax, which people don't even get a rebate for, at least they will start getting the federal rebate, which partially covers the cost of the carbon tax. And then when Poilievre eliminates that, everyone will be far better off. And then
just stop there for 1 second. A lot of people in BC don't know that in British Columbia, we do not get any sort of rebate. I think it's BC, Quebec, and Northwest Territories or something like that. We don't get this rebate. We pay 23% extra, but we don't get the rebate. So I want to make that clear.
And it just goes into general revenues and is spent giving people crack pipes out of vending machines. It just goes to nothing. You don't even know. It's not. I think that at one point they had some sort of like green initiative or whatever. But again, like the federal green initiatives, it ends up becoming a slush fund for ideas that really don't work, and it happens to be that a lot of friends of government officials end up getting these contracts. But I digress. But getting to healthcare,
but if Poilievre gets in and it's a federal thing, then perhaps maybe we'll get this. We will get something, or he might just axe the darn thing.
So right now on October 19th, if the next day we eliminate the carbon tax, the federal government would then take over the carbon tax for BC. So people would get a rebate. And then within a year's time, when Poilievre becomes the prime minister, we can eliminate that. So we can just all get our money back without needing to nickel and dime it back through rebates. But
Thank you for the clarification. Now healthcare. Yeah.
So for healthcare, the BC Conservatives agenda is something that's called Patients First. And what it really is, and it's called fee for service, in how it would be operating. A lot of the NDP want to pretend that this is the privatization of healthcare. What it is allowing for, it's basically the way the system should be working that BC, for some reason, is not doing, is that you can go to a private doctor's office and you can get service, and then the fee for it gets paid out of your provincial insurance. So it's all being paid from the same source that would be paying a doctor at a hospital, but you can go to a clinic and get something done. And it's basically trying to decomplicate the system, because right now so much has to be jammed through the hospitals that doesn't need to be done in the hospitals, that we're slowing the system down for basically getting like minor surgeries on like a hand, or getting stitches. You have to be doing it in an ER. You can't do it at a clinic for a lot of the time. And so fee for service will allow for there to be more, basically a greater supply of healthcare. That's always the problem with all of these issues that we're dealing with in BC. The NDP thinks that it's a demand issue, and conservatives correctly identify it's a supply issue. If we don't have supply, well, then you can't really, demand doesn't mean anything. But the BC NDP on stuff like housing, they pretend like increasing the supply of housing is impossible, and what we just need to be doing is just dividing up the amount of housing we have more evenly or whatever. It's, a very socialistic way of viewing these problems. And overall, I would say that the biggest thing that the BC Conservatives can and very, very likely will do is just lowering taxes, just lowering regulations. It's becoming, you have to be a lawyer to operate in any industry in British Columbia these days because of how complicated things are. We have the highest corporate taxes in the country. Our income taxes, the brackets are the highest in the country, maybe outside of Quebec. It's somewhere where you just can't get ahead. So I think the corporate taxes in the first 2 years of Conservative government should be coming down 3 or 4%. Top marginal tax rates in general should be all uniformly falling, so we can attract more people back into the province. And that will actually cause us to have higher government tax revenues. Donald Trump, when he lowered taxes with his big tax cut bill in the US, they actually brought in more money the next year with lower tax rates, because way more people were, one, willing to be more honest about how much they were earning, and two, more business came back to the country because taxes were far more reasonable.
It just makes complete sense. Nobody's going to spend their money here. No one's going to invest in business here if we tax them to death. It is not a profitable thing, and that just ruins our economy. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. And if people in our government are not aware of this and are running us into the ground for whatever reason they're doing it, it's time for a change. It's time for them to go. But we're going to be keeping our eye on this because, developments are going to happen. There's all these, there's so much to come. We've got, what is it now? So it's September 11th today. So we've got just over a month till the election. So anyway, Wyatt, while I have you here, something else that happened in the news was somebody else got a divorce. Jagmeet and Justin, their little marriage broke up. And first of all, what were his motivations, Jagmeet, to form that coalition when he did 2 years ago? Because it just created this sort of almost monopoly where they could pass all their bills. Like, what was in it for him? He never seemed to like Justin in the first place. Why do you think he did that in 2022?
Well, in a certain sense, the coming together was symbolic just as much as the tearing up the supply and confidence agreement between the NDP and the Liberals was also symbolic. Because since 2019, when Justin Trudeau was not able to secure his second majority, basically, he was always in partnership with the NDP as well as the Bloc Québécois since then. And now, really, I think what originally motivated Jagmeet Singh to have signed the supply and confidence agreement was to look like he's a serious politician who has a serious investment in this government, and try and basically co-sign every, quote unquote achievement of the Liberal government as also an NDP achievement to try and boost his own popularity. And then when all of the policies that Jagmeet Singh was perfectly happy with voting for in the past few years have now turned completely pear-shaped, now he wants to get out and pretend it was not his fault at all. And it was horribly ham-fisted the way he tried to justify getting out of it. It was like, I can't support this Liberal government anymore because something corporations or whatever. Yeah, I don't get what game is, but really it's just that he symbolically wanted to be with Justin before to look like a serious partner in the government, and now he wants to symbolically divorce Justin Trudeau to look like he's a tough oppositional leader, even though he's still going to vote with most of the things Justin Trudeau pushes forward.
Yeah. Isn't there some writing, I don't know what it is, where NDP has a stronghold, so maybe he distanced himself to sort of win that, and he's so hell-bent on saying that he's going to run for prime minister, he's going to keep running as head of his party, but nobody supports him, nobody likes him. Sometimes people just don't know when to pack it in.
It's interesting to watch Jagmeet Singh flounder in Canadian politics. Like, he's no Jack Layton, and he's not even a Thomas Mulcair. Jagmeet Singh has been given the perfect situation on a silver platter for the federal NDP. Justin Trudeau's Liberals are horribly unpopular. Nobody likes them.
Yeah.
And most of the Liberal voters, and this is just human nature, most voters will then try and vote for the next closest thing to basically justify that, oh, well, it's just Justin Trudeau wasn't doing it right. Jagmeet Singh is the new guy. But Jagmeet Singh comes off so incompetent. A lot of both Liberal and some NDP voters are willing to immediately make the jump over to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, even though in previous elections, whenever the Liberals lost votes, they sometimes lost them to the NDP, they lost them to the Bloc, but they really weren't losing them to Andrew Scheer's Conservatives or to Aaron O'Toole's Conservatives, because they would just, that's a completely another story. They just didn't really offer anything that different from the Liberals. But Jagmeet Singh, because he was tying himself way too closely to Justin Trudeau, nobody could justify that he might be able to do it better, because he's technically currently doing it right now. To make another U.S. politics illusion that I've made in the past, it's like Kamala Harris pretending that she's going to be a fresh face in government when she's been in government for the past 4 years.
Yes,
so it's no different than Joe Biden. It's just Joe Biden 2.0 with a different paint job.
Oh yeah, exactly. And Jagmeet Singh seems to have no political experience or knowledge or foresight, or he has no sort of aptitude for this world. I mean, and he does all these press conferences and just absolutely gets crucified. I mean, you can just like weaken him at the knees. He's not good at this at all. He says this, we've ripped up the agreement. We've ripped up the agreement, and he's got nothing to say. How does anyone send him out here without his little talking points?
And your impression of him is almost one-to-one, because when people are asking him, well, is this going to change anything? Are you going to vote against them in confidence? He's like, we've ripped up the agreement. We very much have ripped up that agreement. I took a piece of paper and I ripped it up, and now the agreement is ripped. And it's like, okay, so what? But yeah, and then the thing is that the man has the political timing of a bowling ball going through a plate glass window. He's always 10 days late to any big issue. He just basically poses on everyone that he's super progressive and you're not as progressive as he is, and then ends up going back to his big thing is getting into slap fights with Galen Weston from Loblaws and trying to blame all the grocery stores, but not Metro, because his brother currently works for Metro, for price gouging and record profits, even though, well, one, Metro actually has the highest profit margins, but overall the grocery industry does not have high profit margins. It's actually, the profit margins have been going down. But Jagmeet Singh, either he's stupid or he's a liar. I actually tend to think the latter, that he's pretending as if because revenues are higher because of his inflation, that means all these people are getting away with murder and making so much money. It's hard not to make more money during inflation, just simply because the money is worth less, so people will give you more of it for your products.
They have to. They have no choice. They want to buy groceries. That's what it costs.
But Jagmeet Singh's agenda and his political vehicle, the NDP, relies on people not being economically literate.
Right. And he needs help. He needs a better handler. If he wants to stay in this game, where are his henchmen helping him? They just send him out there very, very unprepared, I would say. But,
the federal NDP used to be more of a workers' party, especially under Jack Layton. It was kind of that blue-collar working class party. Jagmeet Singh, if you ever see him at union protests, strikes, whatever, he actually looks visually uncomfortable being around people who work work sort of hands-on jobs. You can tell he thinks it's grimy, it's dirty, it doesn't really mesh with his Rolex watch type lifestyle. But and that the problem for him in terms of a national appeal for his party is that he keeps doubling down on voters that he's personally comfortable with. He doubles down on women under the age of 35, single women under 35. That's a demographic he was literally bragging about winning on Twitter. It's like, okay, well, that's your only good demographic. He tends to
Is it a true demographic? Because
women under 35 do
seem to like him.
Yeah, a plurality of women under 35 will vote will vote federal NDP. But that's not that big of a voting demographic because young people in general don't vote that much. Like people in their 20s aren't voting. And the conservatives are pretty neck and neck with the NDP, even with that demographic. I think that they're only winning them by 2% more than the conservatives, and the conservatives are smashing it with basically everybody else but this very small group. So the conservatives are winning under 35s massively because they win men in a massive margin. But the thing is with Jagmeet Singh is he keeps doubling down on urban progressives and college town people. Public sector and union members, but even those people tend to vote liberal more these days than NDP.
I see. Yeah, I don't think he's got a shot, but he's in the game. He's still in the game for now, and he's making headlines and just very, very unprepared. It's almost embarrassing.
Here's one last thing on Jagmeet Singh. Everyone always thinks that he's only sticking around because he wants his pension. Yes, I don't really think he cares about the pension that much. Yeah, he'll take it. The man's already independently wealthy. He could go back to being a lawyer and make way more than he does as an MP. But the man loves being on camera. The man loves being talked about. And that's why he keeps holding on as the NDP leader, even though he's obviously not the right man for the job. He likes publicity, and he wants to be in the snapshot of history that if you talk about politics between 2017 and 2025, you have to talk about Jagmeet Singh.
Oh man, if I were him, I'd just get out of the game. Just go. You want attention? Go start a podcast. Go do something else. Go be an actor or something like that. This isn't for you.
But But the problem with that, Anita, is that requires talent. And at least as a politician, the media's forced to cover him. Whereas if he's an actor and he's not good, nobody's gonna care to watch his movie.
Him. He's not gonna get the gig. But he could go podcasting and see what happens. There's space for everyone.
I'd watch an episode.
Yeah, just one. I watched one Don Lemon episode. That was the one with Candace Owens, and that's the only one I've ever watched. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Wyatt, thank you so much for all your political insight. I loved having you on. I love talking to you. Where can people find you?
The best way of finding me is just going on YouTube and typing in the National Telegraph. That's the YouTube channel. I make the most. I make 90% of the videos over there. But Daniel Boardman and Benjamin Dichter also sometimes make content. But it's kind of a bit of a network. I used to write, but Bill C-18 and Justin Trudeau forced me to get better at making videos.
Well, you make great videos. I love watching. I love listening to you because I always learn a lot. And I was so happy to talk to you today. And I hope I get to talk to you again soon. Okay.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to come on.
Okay, cool. And thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.